What if the most impossible wonders changing the world forever aren't hidden in space or buried in myth, but engineered in plain sight, running quietly as part of everyday life? This film isn't a checklist of beautiful places. It's an invitation to explore the systems that make modern life feel smoother than the planet beneath it has any right to be. The first surprise rises in London at the O2, built inside the shell of the former Millennium Dome. A roof spanning a district-sized volume, proving that space itself can be manufactured and repurposed into a working city of events. Then the shock stretches across southern France at the Millau Viaduct, where a highway glides over the Tarn Valley, as if distance can be erased with enough precision. And in Scotland, the Falkirk Wheel turns a canal connection into a rotating machine, lifting boats upward in a single calm motion, making water travel vertically without drama. But the real question is not how spectacular these projects look, it's how they survive reality. How do engineers design structures where load, wind, fatigue, and safety leave no room for trial and error? How do these ideas keep working day after day when the environment never stops pushing back? And once the impossible becomes normal infrastructure, once it becomes something we rely on without thinking, what does that reveal about the next boundary we're about to cross? Stay with us, because we're about to step inside the decisions, the trade-offs, and the engineering logic behind megaprojects that are quietly reshaping how the planet works. Not as headlines, but as routines. Not as miracles, but as systems disciplined enough to turn uncertainty into schedules and scale into something the world can depend on. How do you carry a major highway across a valley so deep that descending into it would slow traffic, increase risk, and break the rhythm of long-distance travel? The Millau Viaduct answers that challenge by refusing the valley altogether. Instead of forcing vehicles down and back up again, the bridge keeps the road suspended high above the Tarn Valley, turning extreme height into routine infrastructure. Completed in 2,004 inches southern France, the viaduct stretches approximately 2,460 meters from end to end, supported by 7 slender piers that rise from the valley floor. At its highest point, the structure reaches about 343 meters above the river, making it one of the tallest bridge structures in the world. Yet despite this scale, the design aims for lightness rather than dominance. The bridge does not compete with the landscape. It traces a clean, horizontal line across it. Structurally, the Millau Viaduct is a cable-stayed bridge, a choice driven by precision and control. Loads are distributed through tall piers and a network of cables that hold the deck in tension, allowing the structure to remain slender while maintaining stiffness. The roadway itself is shaped aerodynamically to stay stable when strong valley winds attempt to lift or twist it. At this altitude, wind is not an occasional condition, it is a constant design force. Construction followed the same logic of control. Instead of building upward from the valley floor, deck sections were launched outward from both sides, advancing over open air until the span became continuous. This approach minimized disruption below and allowed engineers to manage tolerances with millimeter accuracy. What looks effortless from a moving car is the result of tightly choreographed sequencing. The practical payoff is immediate. Long-distance traffic now passes the region without sharp gradients, dangerous curves, or frequent slowdowns. Travel times became more predictable, safety improved, and congestion in the town of Millau was dramatically reduced. The bridge does not just save time, it stabilizes movement. The Millau Viaduct stands as a modern megaproject achievement because it turns height and distance into something ordinary. By holding the road steady above a complex landscape, it demonstrates how precision engineering can erase the friction of geography without erasing the geography itself. The result is infrastructure that feels almost invisible in use, proof that when design and discipline align, even the most daunting terrain can be crossed as part of everyday life. How do you remove a narrow strip of land that forces ships into long, punishing detours and replace it with a single, decisive, cut-through solid rock? The Corinth Canal answers that question with extraordinary directness. Rather than negotiating around geography, it slices straight through it, turning an isthmus into a passage and making the map itself feel negotiable. Opened in 1893, the Corinth Canal cuts across the Isthmus of Corinth, effectively separating the Peloponnese from mainland Greece in practical navigation terms. The canal runs at sea level for about 6.3 kilometers, linking the Aegean-facing side with the Ionian-facing side. For vessels small enough to pass, this short trench replaces a long and often hazardous journey around the southern tip of Greece, saving time, fuel, and exposure to open sea conditions. The canal's achievement is as simple as it is uncompromising. Steep, near-vertical limestone walls rise sharply on either side, forming a narrow corridor where seawater now flows through what was once solid ground. There are no locks, no elevation changes, just a direct incision through bedrock. That decisiveness gives the canal its power, but also defines its limits. With a surface width of roughly 24.6 meters, the Corinth Canal cannot accommodate most modern cargo ships. As vessels have grown larger over time, the canal's role has shifted from a major commercial artery to a precision route for smaller ships, yachts, and specialized traffic. Navigation here is slow and deliberate. Once a vessel commits to the trench, margins for correction are minimal, and pilots must maintain strict control as the limestone walls loom close on either side. Geology never stops pushing back. Weathering and rockfall periodically destabilize the canal's slopes, forcing closures for stabilization and regrading. These interruptions are not failures of the idea, but reminders that cutting through rock creates a long-term maintenance relationship with the landscape. The canal works not because it conquered geology once, but because it continues to be managed in dialogue with it. Despite its constraints, the Corinth Canal permanently altered regional navigation. It delivered a real operational shortcut for the traffic it can support, and demonstrated that even small-scale corridors can have outsized strategic value when well placed. The canal may no longer shape global trade, but it still reshapes local movement every day. The Corinth Canal stands as a megaproject milestone because it proves that bold simplicity can endure. By compressing a geographic obstacle into a single, narrow line of water, it shows that infrastructure does not always need to scale endlessly to matter. Sometimes, cutting the map carefully and with discipline remains enough to change how a region works. How do you carry a working canal across a deep river valley without losing water level, speed, or structural stability, especially at a time when heavy materials and overbuilt solutions were the norm? The Ponce-Silta Aqueduct answers that question with an approach that was radical for its era. Build lighter, span farther, and let precision replace mass. Completed in 1805 during the height of the Industrial Revolution, the aqueduct carries the Llangollen Canal across the Dee Valley in northeast Wales. Stretching about 307 meters in length and standing roughly 38 meters above the river below, it creates a continuous, elevated waterway where boats appear to glide across open air in near silence. For the canal network of its time, This was not a spectacle. It was a practical necessity to keep trade and transport moving efficiently. The key innovation lies in how the structure manages weight. Instead of carving a heavy stone channel, engineer Thomas Telford, working with William Jessup, designed the aqueduct as a narrow cast iron trough supported by hollow masonry piers. This combination dramatically reduced mass while preserving stiffness where it mattered most. The iron channel holds the water. The piers carry the load with minimal material, allowing the structure to rise high without becoming unwieldy. That restraint is what makes the crossing feel so exposed. On one side of the aqueduct, a towpath with a simple railing allows horses and, today, pedestrians to pass safely. On the other side, the water's edge is left deliberately open, offering no visual barrier between the canal and the void below. This was not an oversight, but a design decision rooted in confidence in the structure's stability. The aqueduct does not try to hide its height, it trusts its engineering. Functionally, the result is seamless movement. Boats, water, and people cross the valley in one unbroken line, as if the landscape never interrupted the route at all. There are no locks, no pauses, no changes in level, just continuity. That continuity was essential for industrial transport, where delays translated directly into lost time and money. More than 2 centuries later, the aqueduct remains in active use, a testament to the durability of its design. In 2009, it was recognized as part of the Ponce-Silta Aqueduct and Canal World Heritage Site, not as a relic, but as living infrastructure that still performs its original task. The Ponce-Silta Aqueduct stands as a mega-project achievement of its time because it redefined what infrastructure could be. By choosing lightness over brute force, it demonstrated that long spans and reliable movement could be achieved through careful engineering rather than excess material. It proves that some of the most enduring megaprojects succeed not by overpowering geography, but by understanding it well enough to cross it cleanly and keep crossing it day after day. What do engineers do when a river's greatest threat is not just water, but the mud carried inside it, sediment so persistent it can rebuild the riverbed faster than people can dredge it away? On China's Yellow River, the Xiaolangdi Dam was built to confront that problem directly, treating flood control and sediment management as a single, inseparable challenge. Located in Henan Province, Xiaolangdi sits at a strategic control point on the middle reaches of the Yellow River, a river long known for its heavy silt load and unpredictable behavior. Rather than relying on storage alone, the dam was designed as an active regulator, capable of managing both peak flows and the sediment that turns those flows into long-term, downstream risk. Structurally, it is an embankment, rock-filled dam, rising about 154 meters, sized not only for water volume, but for operational flexibility. Sediment does not behave like a simple contaminant. It settles, compacts, and gradually steals channel capacity, forcing water levels higher for the same discharge downstream. Left unmanaged, this process increases flood risk for millions of people living along the lower Yellow River. Xiaolangdi's response is mechanical and deliberate. Low-level outlets and control works are used not just to pass water, but to move sediment with it. Since 2002, operators have carried out scheduled water sediment regulation releases. During these events, high flows are pushed through the dam's lower outlets, scouring trapped silt and transporting it downstream in controlled pulses. These releases are planned, monitored, and repeated, turning what would otherwise be emergency floods into a managed cycle. The river's notorious heaviness is not eliminated, but it is guided. At the same time, Xiaolangdi functions as a major energy asset. Hydropower units with a combined capacity of roughly 1,836 megawatts feed electricity into the grid, linking river regulation with power generation. This dual role reflects the dam's broader logic: one structure and multiple pressures relieved through coordinated operation. The trade-offs are significant. Large-scale resettlement, accompanied construction, and altered erosion patterns upstream and downstream continue to affect ecosystems. Environmental impacts require ongoing monitoring and mitigation, reinforcing the idea that control of a river this complex is never a finished task. Xiaolangdi Dam stands as a mega-project achievement not because it stops the Yellow River, but because it gives the river's most difficult ingredient, sediment, a controlled pathway. By transforming mud from an uncontrollable threat into a managed variable, the dam reduces flood risk while delivering reliable power. It shows that on a river defined by instability, the true engineering victory lies not in domination, but in disciplined, repeatable control that holds day after day. How does a country respond when its rivers and rainfall refuse to align with where people actually live? In China, the South-North Water Transfer Project tackles that imbalance by treating water supply as a national-scale system rather than a collection of local fixes. Instead of waiting for nature to cooperate, the project reorganizes geography, redirecting water from the humid south toward the drier, more densely populated north. Conceived as one of the largest water engineering efforts in human history, the project is not a single canal, but a network of routes designed to move water across vast distances. Multiple corridors guide water from the Yangtze River basin toward northern cities, using gravity where possible and pumping and control works where terrain intervenes. This distributed approach allows operators to adapt flows to seasonal variation, demand, and maintenance needs, rather than relying on one rigid line. The pressure it addresses is structural. Northern China supports major cities, industry, and agriculture, yet historically depended on overdrawn rivers and depleted aquifers. Groundwater levels fell, rivers ran dry, and scarcity became a constraint on growth. By redistributing water at continental scale, the transfer project reduces stress on these fragile systems, stabilizing supply for households, factories, and farmland that once relied on uncertain sources. Engineering challenges extend far beyond excavation. Maintaining water quality over long distances requires constant monitoring, filtration, and coordinated operation across provinces with competing priorities. The system must prevent pollution, manage sediment, and ensure that transferred water arrives usable, not merely present. Reliability depends as much on governance and discipline as on concrete and steel. The project also carries significant social and environmental trade-offs. Construction involved large-scale resettlement, altered river regimes, and ecological impacts along both donor and receiving basins. These effects are not hidden costs. They are managed realities that continue to shape how the system is operated and expanded. Like all megaprojects of this scale, it is not finished at opening, but continuously adjusted as conditions change. What makes the South-North Water Transfer Project remarkable is its reframing of scarcity. Water shortage here is no longer treated solely as a local disaster or seasonal anomaly, but as a logistical challenge that can be planned, routed, and scheduled. Rivers become components in a larger network rather than isolated lifelines. The South-North Water Transfer Project stands as a mega-project achievement because it turns imbalance into coordination. By moving water to where it is needed most, it reshapes how an entire nation thinks about supply, risk, and resilience. It demonstrates that at extreme scale, survival depends not on waiting for favorable geography, but on designing systems capable of redistributing nature itself, carefully, deliberately, and every single day. How do you move energy across a wilderness where roads, rivers, earthquakes, and permafrost refuse to cooperate and do it reliably for decades? The Trans-Alaska Pipeline answers that challenge by abandoning the idea of a single, rigid solution. Instead, it was designed as a system that can move with the land rather than fight it, turning adaptability into its core engineering principle. Completed in 1977, the pipeline stretches roughly 1,300 kilometers from the oil fields of Prudhoe Bay on the Arctic coast to the ice-free port of Valdez in southern Alaska. The route crosses some of the most demanding terrain on Earth: mountain ranges, hundreds of rivers and streams, active fault lines, and vast areas of permafrost that freeze and thaw unpredictably. In such conditions, traditional buried pipelines would crack, buckle, or fail. The solution was variation. About half of the pipeline runs above ground on elevated supports, while the rest is buried where conditions allow. In permafrost zones, the elevated sections prevent heat from the oil from melting the frozen ground beneath, which would destabilize foundations. The supports themselves are engineered with sliding shoes and heat-dissipating fins, allowing the pipe to expand, contract, and shift without breaking. Earthquakes posed another critical test. The pipeline crosses active seismic zones, including the Denali Fault. Rather than trying to resist movement with brute stiffness, engineers designed sections that could flex and absorb motion. During the 2002 Denali earthquake, the pipeline moved several meters, without rupturing a real-world validation of its design philosophy. River crossings demanded equal care. Instead of fragmenting the landscape with numerous access roads and bridges, the pipeline concentrates crossings into carefully engineered spans and buried sections, reducing environmental disruption. By centralizing energy transport into a single controlled corridor, the system also reduced the need for tanker traffic across fragile Arctic waters and remote land routes. Operationally, the pipeline transformed isolated oil fields into a predictable supply line. Pump stations, monitoring systems, and maintenance regimes work continuously to manage pressure, temperature, and flow. Reliability here is not accidental. It is the result of constant surveillance and disciplined operation in an environment that punishes neglect. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline stands as a mega-project achievement because it redefined how infrastructure can exist in extreme geography. Instead of insisting on permanence, it was built to accommodate movement, change, and uncertainty. By designing for flexibility rather than domination, the pipeline proved that even in one of the harshest environments on the planet, large-scale energy systems can operate safely and predictably, so long as engineering respects the ground beneath it and plans for the forces that will inevitably act upon it. How do you lift fully loaded boats between two canal levels without creating a slow, energy-hungry staircase of locks that turns movement into delay? Near the town of Falkirk in Scotland, the Falkirk wheel answers that question by replacing repetition with rotation. It transforms a vertical gap into a single, calm, mechanical action, making waterborne transport rise upward as smoothly as if gravity itself had been reprogrammed. Opened in 2002, the Falkirk Wheel was built to reconnect the Forth and Clyde Canal with the Union Canal, restoring a navigation link that had been broken for decades. The height difference between the two waterways is about 35 meters. Traditionally, that change would require a long flight of locks, each demanding time, water, and labor. Instead, the wheel concentrates most of the lift, about 24 meters, into one controlled rotation, with a short pair of locks handling the remaining elevation. What makes this possible is not brute force, but balance. The wheel consists of two large, water-filled caissons, mounted at opposite ends of a rotating arm. Each caisson always holds the same weight, because a boat entering simply displaces an equal volume of water. As a result, the system remains perfectly balanced, regardless of whether boats are present. The motor does not lift weight. It overcomes friction and guides motion with precision. This design choice fundamentally changes how energy is used. The wheel consumes remarkably little power for each rotation, relying on geometry and physics rather than raw strength. The movement itself is slow and deliberate, emphasizing control over speed. To observers, the effect feels almost unreal. Massive basins of water rotate like a giant Ferris wheel, while the canal surface remains calm, with barely a ripple to hint at the transformation taking place. Functionally, the Falkirk Wheel turns a complex geographic problem into a repeatable, predictable cycle. Boats pass through without long waits, queues of gates, or constant stopping and starting. Communities and leisure traffic are reconnected, and a broken route becomes continuous again. Not through expansion, but through elegant compression of effort. Beyond its utility, the wheel also reframed public expectations of infrastructure. It is unapologetically visible, even sculptural, yet its form is inseparable from its function. This is not art applied to engineering. It is engineering that expresses itself clearly. The Falkirk Wheel stands as a rare megaproject achievement where physics, geometry, and restraint do the heavy lifting. By designing around balance instead of force, it turns an elevation change into an everyday experience, quiet, reliable, and repeatable. It proves that sometimes the most radical infrastructure does not push harder against nature, but aligns with it so precisely that even lifting water upward feels effortless. At the heart of Jewel Changi, the rain vortex drops a continuous column of water through a vast indoor garden, falling from the roof's central oculus to the levels below. At over 40 meters tall, it is the world's tallest indoor waterfall, but its significance is not measured by height alone. This falling water is part of a closed-loop system that collects rain from the roof, filters it, and recirculates it, making water management visible rather than buried beneath concrete. The vortex also serves as a powerful spatial anchor. In a complex building filled with retail, gardens, walkways, and multiple levels of circulation, orientation is a constant challenge. The waterfall provides a clear visual center, allowing passengers to navigate instinctively rather than through signage alone. Movement organizes itself around the water, turning wayfinding into an intuitive experience. The Jewel Changi Rain Vortex stands as a mega-project achievement because it redefines what transit infrastructure can be. By merging engineering, environment, and public experience into one continuous system, it proves that even places designed for speed and efficiency can support calm, climate intelligence, and wonder. It shows that when infrastructure works with natural forces instead of suppressing them, everyday movement can feel less like transit and more like arrival. How do you move thousands of people across open sea every day without carving roads into islands, crowding harbors with ferries, or breaking the natural rhythm of the water below? Off the coast of Fukuoka, the Hon-therm cable car answers that challenge by lifting transportation into the air, turning distance into a smooth, continuous glide rather than a slow and uncertain marine crossing. How do you design a major airport space where climate, orientation, and movement work together, rather than fighting each other inside one of the world's busiest transport hubs? At Julchangi Airport, the rain vortex answers that challenge by turning water itself into infrastructure. Instead of hiding rain as a problem to be drained away, the design captures it, choreographs it, and makes it the organizing force of the entire space. Functionally, the vortex acts as a climate moderator. As water descends, it cools the surrounding air through evaporation, helping stabilize temperature in a large, enclosed volume without relying entirely on energy-intensive mechanical systems. The sound of the falling water softens the acoustic environment, masking airport noise and reducing the stress typically associated with transit spaces. What could have been an overwhelming hall becomes calm, legible, and surprisingly human. At night, the system shifts roles again. Lighting and projection transform the falling water into a dynamic visual surface, allowing the same infrastructure to support spectacle without adding separate components. This adaptability reflects a core design philosophy. Every element must do more than one job to justify its presence at scale. Operational reliability is essential. Pumps, filters, sensors, and drainage systems must function continuously to maintain water quality and safety in a high-traffic environment. Any failure would be immediately visible, which is why maintenance and monitoring are treated as integral parts of the design, not afterthoughts. The beauty of the vortex depends entirely on disciplined operation. Stretching nearly 8 kilometers from Anther on Fukuoka Island to Hon-therm, the cable car is one of the longest overwater cable systems in the world. Its purpose is not spectacle alone, but reliability. Traditional ferry routes must contend with waves, tides, weather disruptions, docking schedules, and fuel logistics. By contrast, the cable car operates on a fixed aerial corridor, maintaining predictable travel times regardless of sea conditions below. Elevation changes the entire experience of movement. Suspended high above the water, cabins move steadily and quietly, detached from surface congestion. For passengers, the journey becomes part of the destination, offering uninterrupted views of islands, reefs, and open sea. For operators, the benefit is operational control. Movement is continuous, capacity is measurable, and scheduling is precise. From an engineering perspective, the system concentrates infrastructure into a narrow line rather than spreading it across the water. Towers are positioned to minimize disruption to marine traffic and ecosystems, while tensioned cables are designed to withstand wind loads, corrosion from salt air, and constant mechanical fatigue. Overwater cable systems demand exceptional reliability because maintenance access is more complex and failures are immediately visible. The cable car also reshapes tourism logistics. Large visitor volumes can be transported efficiently without multiplying boats, docks, or fuel use. This reduces pressure on coastal infrastructure and avoids the cascading effects of ferry congestion, such as shoreline erosion and harbor crowding. What looks like leisure infrastructure functions In practice, as a high-capacity transport link, safety and redundancy are central to daily operation. Systems are designed with backup power, monitoring sensors, and emergency protocols to ensure that movement remains controlled even during unexpected interruptions. In this environment, calm motion is not accidental, it is engineered. Beyond transportation, the Hon-Therm cable car redefines how islands connect. Instead of forcing land and sea into conflict through roads or bridges, it introduces a third dimension, air, as a shared solution. The sea remains open and undisturbed, while people move above it with minimal footprint. The Hon-Therm cable car stands as a mega-project achievement because it proves that coastal connectivity does not require domination of the water. By lifting mobility into the air, it delivers quiet, predictable access while preserving the character of the seascape below. It demonstrates that sometimes the most effective way to cross a difficult environment is not to cut through it, but to rise just above it, and let both systems continue to work uninterrupted. What happens when a city runs out of usable shoreline and decides the only way forward is to build new land in open water, then make that land behave like it has always been there? Palm Jumeirah answers that challenge by transforming the sea itself into urban ground, engineered not just to exist, but to function every day under constant pressure from waves, tides, and time. From above, the island's geometry is instantly recognizable. A stylized palm with a central trunk, 17 fronds arranged like a planned street grid, and a crescent-shaped breakwater enclosing the whole form. But the true achievement of Palm Jumeirah lies beneath the image. The first and hardest battle is against wave energy and erosion. To protect the island, engineers built an 11-kilometer-long crescent breakwater, designed to absorb and deflect the force of the Persian Gulf before it can reach the fronds and trunk. That protection, however, created a new problem. By slowing natural tidal exchange, the crescent initially encouraged water stagnation within the enclosed lagoons. The solution was not cosmetic, but systemic. Openings were introduced into the breakwater, and circulation was carefully tuned to restore water movement, preventing the lagoons from becoming ecologically unstable. Stability here is not static, it is actively managed. The ground itself is the real mega-project. Millions of cubic meters of sand were dredged, placed with extreme precision, and then densified using ground improvement techniques so the material would behave like buildable land rather than a drifting pile. Every foundation, road, and utility line depends on that hidden discipline. Without it, the palm would slowly deform under its own weight. Operationally, Palm Jumeirah is not a finished object, but a system that must be maintained to remain land. Narrow channels, armored edges, and constant inspection turn the coastline into an engineered boundary rather than a natural one. The sea never stops trying to revise the shape, and the project's success depends on never stopping the response. Daily life only works because connectivity was planned from the start. The trunk is linked to the mainland by fixed road connections, including a tunnel, while a monorail runs roughly 5.4 kilometers toward the crescent, supporting movement without overloading local roads. Tourism, housing, and services concentrate on land that had to be measured into existence. Palm Jumeirah stands as a mega-project lesson in coastal realism. Building the shape was only the beginning. The real achievement lies in sustaining stability, circulation, and access in a place the sea continually tests. It demonstrates that creating land is not a one-time act of construction, but a long-term commitment to engineering, monitoring, and care, turning open water into everyday urban life. How do you span a roof the size of a district, make it feel light, and then keep it useful after its original purpose collapses under political and financial controversy? The O2, originally built as the Millennium Dome, answers that question by proving that manufactured space can outlast its first idea if the structure itself is disciplined enough. Completed in 1999 on the Greenwich Peninsula, the Millennium Dome was conceived as a one-year exhibition celebrating the new millennium. Its defining feature is the vast white tensile roof, spanning roughly 365 meters in diameter. Engineered from fabric and cables, the roof system is so efficient that official descriptions note it weighs less than the air contained inside the enclosed volume. Bright yellow masts pin the canopy into tension, creating a structure that appears almost too delicate for the space it claims. When the exhibition closed, the project's future became uncertain. What remained was not a failed building, but an enormous, empty volume. That volume became the asset. The dome was later repurposed as the outer shell of the O2 Entertainment District, transforming an abstract civic experiment into reliable, everyday urban infrastructure. Inside the envelope now sits a purpose-built arena capable of seating around 20,000 people, along with cinemas, performance venues, restaurants, and public circulation. The roof does not dictate a single program. It enables many. By enclosing such a large, column-free space, the structure allows events to scale without rebuilding the building itself. Flexibility becomes the key to longevity. Lightweight systems, however, demand constant respect. The fabric roof is vulnerable to extreme weather, and in 2022, Storm Eunice tore multiple roof panels, forcing temporary closures. The incident was not a failure of the concept, but a reminder that tension structures rely on inspection, maintenance, and rapid repair to remain safe. Efficiency reduces material, but it increases the need for operational discipline. What makes the O2 a megaproject success is not its initial ambition, but its adaptation. The structure did not need to be demolished or radically altered to survive. Its engineering logic, maximum span, with minimal material, made reuse possible when the original narrative failed. The O2 stands as a megaproject achievement in adaptive reuse. It demonstrates that large-scale infrastructure can be resilient, not by predicting the future perfectly, but by remaining open to it. By turning a controversial one-off event space into a dependable venue for everyday public life, the dome shows how disciplined structural design can convert manufactured space into lasting urban value long after the headlines fade. How do you compress an entire entertainment district into a single footprint without overwhelming the city around it? Marina Bay Sands answers that challenge by stacking urban life vertically, transforming height into usable, connected infrastructure rather than isolated towers. What emerges is not one building, but a tightly integrated system that operates as part of Singapore's daily rhythm. Completed in 2010 on reclaimed land at the edge of Marina Bay, the complex consists of 3 hotel towers linked at the top by a vast sky park. This elevated platform, longer than many city blocks, turns what would normally be hidden rooftop space into active civic territory. Instead of mechanical rooms and closed surfaces, the roof becomes a place for walking, gathering, swimming, and viewing the city. Height here is not an endpoint. It is another layer of public ground. Below, the project concentrates hotels, retail, dining, convention space, theaters, and a casino into a compact base. By pulling so many activities into one address, Marina Bay Sands reduces horizontal sprawl and shortens the distances between functions that would otherwise be scattered across the city. Movement becomes more efficient, and the waterfront remains open and legible rather than fragmented by separate developments. Structurally, the challenge lies in coordination. The three towers must behave independently under wind and load, while the sky park spanning them has to accommodate movement, crowds, and water without transferring disruptive forces between structures. The solution required precise engineering tolerances and expansion strategies that allow the system to flex safely while appearing seamless to users. Operationally, the complex functions like a vertical city. Thousands of guests, visitors, and staff move through the site each day, supported by layered circulation, high-capacity elevators, and redundant safety systems. Services, power, water, climate control, waste, and security are managed continuously because at this density, interruption is not an option. Reliability is what allows spectacle to feel effortless. The infinity pool at the top has become the project's most recognizable image, but it is also a lesson in infrastructure. Holding water at extreme height demands strict structural control, waterproofing, and maintenance discipline. What looks like leisure is underwritten by constant engineering vigilance. Beyond tourism, Marina Bay Sands reshapes Singapore's skyline and urban identity. It anchors the surrounding financial and cultural district, drawing activity upward while remaining connected to transit and pedestrian networks below. The building does not stand apart from the city, it amplifies it. Marina Bay Sands stands as a megaproject achievement because it proves that scale does not have to fragment urban life. By integrating density, movement, and public space into one continuous system, it turns vertical ambition into everyday experience. It shows that when architecture is designed to operate as infrastructure, even the largest developments can feel coherent, accessible, and alive day after day. How do you build a stadium for the next generation of sport and global media without letting its sheer size overwhelm the city that surrounds it? SoFi Stadium answers that challenge by doing something counterintuitive. Instead of rising higher, it sinks lower. By pushing much of its volume below ground level, the project turns a traditionally bulky building type into a landscape-integrated system that feels expansive inside, while remaining restrained from the street. Opened in 2,020 inches, Inglewood, near Los Angeles, SoFi Stadium was designed to host major sporting events, concerts, and international broadcasts at the highest technical standard. Rather than placing a massive bowl on top of the site, engineers excavated deep into the ground, allowing spectators to descend gradually into the venue. This move reduces the apparent height of the structure, preserves surrounding sightlines, and softens the stadium's impact on nearby neighborhoods. The heart of the building is an open, inward-facing bowl optimized for visibility and movement. Circulation paths are wide and intuitive, allowing tens of thousands of people to enter, exit, and reposition without bottlenecks. At full capacity, crowd behavior becomes a systems problem, and SoFi's layout treats movement as something to be engineered, not left to chance. Floating above the stadium is a vast, translucent canopy, one of the project's defining features. Rather than enclosing the venue completely, the roof shields spectators from sun and weather, while remaining open at the sides. This allows air, light, and sound to move freely, maintaining a connection to the outdoor environment. The canopy also functions as working infrastructure, carrying lighting, acoustics, and broadcast equipment essential for high-definition global transmission. Media integration is central to the design. A massive dual-sided video board hangs over the field, visible from every seat and engineered to remain stable despite its scale. The stadium is not just a place to watch events. It is a production platform designed for a world where live experiences and digital audiences operate simultaneously. Beyond event days, the site extends into plazas and public spaces that keep the area active year-round. This continuity prevents the stadium from becoming a dormant object between games. Instead, it behaves as part of the urban fabric, supporting gatherings, movement, and everyday use. SoFi Stadium stands as a mega-project achievement because it rethinks how large venues relate to cities. By burying mass, opening space, and integrating architecture with landscape and media systems, it transforms a traditionally isolated building into a flexible, urban-scale machine. It proves that at extreme capacity, success is not about being seen from everywhere, but about working smoothly for everyone, every time the city calls on it. How do you build a landmark that does not compete with a skyline already crowded by icons, but instead helps a city explain itself? The Dubai frame answers that question by turning orientation into infrastructure. Rather than adding another tower to the race for height, it creates a controlled viewpoint that frames the city's transformation, making time and geography legible through a single, deliberate gesture. Rising about 150 meters near Zabil Park, the Dubai frame is exactly what its name suggests. Two vertical towers connected by a horizontal bridge at the top, forming a massive rectangular portal. Its power does not come from mass or complexity, but from position. From the observation deck, visitors look in one direction toward older districts of Dubai, and in the other toward the modern skyline of glass towers. The structure does not dominate the city. It organizes how the city is seen. This simplicity hides a precise engineering challenge. A form this open must resist wind and load without the redundancy of a solid core. The two vertical legs act as structural anchors, while the top span carries not only visitors, but also movement systems, services, and safety infrastructure. The bridge has to feel calm and stable under constant foot traffic, even as environmental forces act on the frame from multiple directions. Operationally, the Dubai frame functions as public infrastructure rather than a static monument. Elevators, crowd management, and safety systems must handle continuous daily flow, not occasional visits. The experience is designed to be intuitive: ascent, crossing, or descent, each step reinforcing the idea of transition. The glass floor sections at the top add a controlled moment of exposure, reminding visitors of height without turning the crossing into spectacle for its own sake. What makes the project distinctive is its restraint. The frame does not tell a story through exhibits or narration alone. It lets the city do the talking. Old neighborhoods, highways, and new towers become the content, while the structure itself remains neutral. In this way, the frame operates like a piece of urban equipment, setting boundaries, aligning perspectives, and clarifying relationships that already exist but are difficult to grasp at ground level. Its location between historic areas and newer developments is not accidental. The structure acts as a hinge between eras, making growth visible rather than abstract. Instead of celebrating only the future, it acknowledges continuity, allowing visitors to understand change as a process rather than a rupture. The Dubai frame stands as a mega-project achievement because it proves that infrastructure does not need complexity to deliver meaning. By using minimal form to create maximum clarity, it transforms viewing into understanding. It shows that sometimes the most powerful intervention in a city is not adding more, but framing what is already there. So daily life, past and present, can be seen together in one coherent view. How does a city decide to grow straight upward until structure, wind, and human comfort all collide at once? Burj Khalifa answers that question by turning extreme vertical ambition into a carefully managed system, one where height is not an act of bravado, but a solution to urban pressure. Rising from the desert, the tower concentrates growth vertically instead of spreading endlessly outward, reshaping how Dubai organizes land, density, and identity. Completed in 2010, Burj Khalifa reaches a height of 828 meters, making it the tallest building ever constructed. But its defining achievement is not the number itself, it is how that height is made usable. The tower rises from a compact footprint and tapers as it climbs, a strategy chosen not for symbolism, but for aerodynamics. By stepping the form as it ascends, the structure disrupts wind vortices that would otherwise build destructive oscillations around a smooth shaft. Wind is not resisted, it is broken up. At this scale, gravity and logistics become daily operational problems. Materials had to be pumped to unprecedented heights, requiring new approaches to concrete composition, curing, and delivery. Elevators had to function across hundreds of floors with speed, reliability, and redundancy. Fire safety, water supply, climate control, and maintenance systems all had to operate as part of a vertical district rather than a conventional building. Every system had to assume constant use, because at this density, interruption is not tolerable. Inside, Burj Khalifa functions as stacked city space residences, offices, hotels, observation levels, organized to keep circulation efficient and predictable. The building does not merely house people, it orchestrates movement, services, and comfort over vertical distance that would otherwise fragment daily life. Reliability is what allows height to feel normal rather than exhausting. At the top, observation decks translate vertical scale into experience. From above, Dubai reads less like a collection of streets and more like geography, coastlines, desert, and infrastructure compressed into a single view. Height becomes a tool for understanding the city's scale, not just celebrating it. Beyond the tower itself, Burj Khalifa anchors surrounding development. By concentrating attention and activity into a dense core, it pulls offices, housing, tourism, and services inward, reducing the need for constant outward expansion. The building acts as both symbol and stabilizer, shaping growth patterns around it. Burj Khalifa stands as a mega-project achievement because it proves that extreme height can be planned, built, and operated as part of everyday urban life. It transforms vertical ambition into dependable infrastructure, showing that when engineering discipline matches scale, even the tallest structures can move from headline to routine, standing not as monuments to excess, but as working pieces of the city itself. How does a city build a cultural megaproject that looks like the future in daylight, and then keep that future-looking form from becoming a long-term burden of maintenance, cost, and controversy? In Valencia, the City of Arts and Sciences answers that question by revealing both sides of iconic infrastructure. its power to transform urban identity, and the discipline required to sustain it over time. Rising from the former riverbed of the Turia, the complex appears less like a collection of buildings and more like a skeletal landscape laid out under open sky. Designed primarily by Santiago Calatrava, with Felix Candela contributing to the oceanarium's thin shell structures, the project unfolded in phases from 1998 through 2009. Opera House, Science Museum, Planetarium, Aquarium, and public promenades are stitched together into one continuous, walkable, cultural district. At its core, the project is an act of urban reuse. After catastrophic flooding in the mid-20th century, the Turia River was diverted, leaving behind a wide, linear void through the city. The City of Arts and Sciences transformed this former risk corridor into a civic anchor, turning leftover infrastructure into a destination that attracts residents and visitors alike. The most prominent component, l'Oceanographic, is often described as Europe's largest aquarium. Here, architecture and marine engineering merge into a controlled ecosystem designed for mass visitation. Water quality, temperature, life support systems, and visitor circulation must all be managed simultaneously, reinforcing the idea that spectacle at this scale only works when operations are precise and continuous. Yet the same precision that makes the complex visually striking also increases its long-term demands. Officially cited project costs reached roughly €1.2 a billion, and over time, issues with cladding, waterproofing, and structural detailing became public. Facade elements detached, repairs were required, and legal disputes followed. These challenges did not erase the project's value, but they exposed an unavoidable truth of megaprojects. Iconic form is a life cycle commitment, not a one-time achievement. The building's white surfaces, reflective pools, and exposed geometry amplify maintenance sensitivity. Materials chosen for visual clarity must perform under sun, humidity, and constant public use. When they falter, the failure is immediately visible. In this sense, the City of Arts and Sciences operates as a real-time lesson in accountability, where beauty and upkeep are inseparable. Despite these tensions, the complex fundamentally reshaped Valencia's global image. It provided a cultural gravity point, reactivated a dormant urban corridor, and demonstrated how infrastructure, architecture, and public space can merge into a single civic system. The City of Arts and Sciences stands as a megaproject achievement, not because it avoided difficulty, but because it made those difficulties visible. It shows that visionary design can redefine a city, but only sustained engineering discipline, maintenance, and governance can keep that vision functioning as everyday urban life. How do you build a world-class museum in a desert climate where heat, glare, and humidity make open-air public space almost impossible without sealing everything inside a conventional, energy-hungry box? The Louvre Abu Dhabi answers that challenge by treating shade, light, and air as primary building materials. Rather than fighting the environment, it collaborates with it, turning climate control into architecture itself. Opened in 2017 on Saadiyat Island, the museum is not conceived as a single monumental object. Instead, it unfolds as a low, horizontal museum city, made up of galleries, courtyards, and narrow passageways arranged along the water's edge. This fragmented layout keeps scale human and movement gradual, allowing visitors to experience the museum as a sequence of spaces rather than one overwhelming interior. Above it all floats the defining element, a vast perforated dome spanning about 180 meters. At first glance, the dome appears solid, but it is in fact a layered lattice of geometric patterns. Sunlight filters through thousands of openings, creating a shifting rain of light, that moves across floors and walls throughout the day. This filtered illumination reduces glare and heat while preserving the feeling of daylight, an essential balance in a region where the sun is both abundant and harsh. The dome is not decorative, it is a climate machine. By casting continuous shade, it lowers temperatures in outdoor circulation areas, making open-air movement possible even in extreme conditions. The proximity to water further enhances cooling through evaporation and airflow, turning courtyards and walkways into comfortable transitional spaces rather than exposed zones to rush through. Operationally, this approach allows the museum to rely less on fully enclosed, mechanically conditioned interiors than a traditional gallery would require. Sensitive artworks remain protected in controlled environments, but circulation and gathering spaces benefit from passive cooling strategies. Energy demand is reduced not by sacrificing comfort, but by redistributing where and how control is applied. The museum's waterfront setting reinforces this logic. Water becomes part of the experience and the microclimate, reflecting light upward into the dome while softening the surrounding heat. Architecture, environment, and site operate as one integrated system. Beyond its technical achievements, the Louvre Abu Dhabi reframes cultural infrastructure for extreme climates. It demonstrates that museums do not need to withdraw from their surroundings to protect art. Instead, they can mediate between people, place, and climate with precision and restraint. The Louvre Abu Dhabi stands as a mega-project achievement because it proves that environmental intelligence can replace brute force enclosure. By turning shade into structure and light into a controlled resource, it creates a cultural landmark that works with geography rather than against it. It shows that even in the harshest settings, thoughtful engineering can make public life possible, calmly, comfortably, and every day. How does a place built for extraction, dark, deep, and industrial, transform into a safe public environment without losing the strange power of its underground scale? The Slenic salt mine answers that question by converting an engineered void into controlled interior space, where geology, climate stability, and human access are carefully balanced rather than erased. Located in Prahova County, Slenic is one of the largest salt mines in Europe. What was once an industrial site carved for resource extraction has been repurposed into a subterranean destination used for tourism, recreation, and long-duration stays. Visitors descend roughly 208 meters below the surface, leaving behind weather, noise, and daylight for an environment that feels remarkably constant. That constancy is the mine's defining asset. The underground microclimate remains stable year-round, with temperatures commonly around 12 degrees Celsius and humidity levels that feel naturally regulated compared to the surface above. This predictability is not accidental. It results from the thermal mass of the surrounding salt and the sheer scale of the excavated chambers, which buffer rapid environmental change. In a world increasingly shaped by climate volatility, stability itself becomes infrastructure. The geometry of the mine reinforces this effect. Instead of narrow tunnels, Slenic opens into vast trapezoidal chambers cut for structural stability. The oversized proportions give the interior the feeling of an underground district rather than a passageway. Ceilings rise high overhead, walls stretch outward, and the absence of columns or tight corridors reduces the psychological sense of confinement that underground spaces often create. Repurposing a mine at this scale requires disciplined engineering oversight. Air quality, lighting, access routes, and emergency systems must be managed continuously to keep the space safe for public use. Salt environments are corrosive, and ongoing maintenance is essential to protect infrastructure and visitors alike. The success of the mine as a public space depends not on its novelty, but on constant monitoring and care. Slenic is also widely promoted for speleotherapy-style use, with research and facility reports discussing how salt mine microclimates are employed for respiratory care programs. While the medical benefits continue to be studied, the operational reality remains clear. The space must remain clean, stable, and controlled to support any long-duration occupation underground. What distinguishes Slenic from surface-level megaprojects is its relationship to visibility. Nothing about the mine announces itself on the skyline. Its scale is hidden, and its impact is felt only after descent. Yet once inside, the engineered void reveals itself as a powerful piece of spatial infrastructure, one that turns absence into capacity. The Slenic salt mine stands as a mega-project achievement in adaptive reuse. It shows how extraction-era engineering can be transformed into a stable, climate-buffered public asset without rebuilding from scratch. By reprogramming a place designed to remove material into one that hosts everyday life, it demonstrates that some of the most resilient infrastructure is not built upward or outward, but carved inward, then carefully sustained over time. How do you build a permanent road through a desert where sand never stops moving, wind rewrites the landscape daily, and maintenance is not an occasional task, but a constant battle? The Taklamakan Desert Highway answers that challenge by treating the desert not as a surface to conquer, but as a system that must be managed continuously if a line of movement is to survive. Stretching across the heart of the Taklamakan Desert in Xinjiang, the highway cuts a direct north-south corridor through one of the world's largest shifting sand deserts. Before its construction, travel across this region relied on long detours around the desert's edge, seasonal routes, or limited air transport. Isolation was not just geographic, it was operational. The highway replaced uncertainty with year-round access, turning an extreme environment into a predictable transport link. The central engineering problem is sand itself. Unlike rock or soil, desert dunes migrate. Wind lifts, pushes, and redeposits sand relentlessly, threatening to bury pavement within days if left unchecked. The solution was not a single barrier, but a layered system. Sand control measures line the roadway, including straw checkerboard grids, vegetation belts, and stabilized corridors designed to slow wind velocity and trap moving sand before it reaches the road's surface. Water scarcity adds another layer of complexity. To support vegetation in such an arid environment, groundwater extraction and irrigation systems were integrated into the highway's operation. Plants are not decorative. Here they are, infrastructure. Their roots bind sand, their bodies disrupt airflow, and their survival determines whether the road remains passable. Maintaining them is part of maintaining the highway itself. Heat and isolation further shape design decisions. Materials must withstand extreme temperature swings, and the route must support emergency access, fuel supply, and maintenance operations over vast distances with little natural shelter. Reliability depends on constant monitoring and rapid response. Because small failures in this environment escalate quickly, the impact of the highway goes beyond transportation. It enables energy development, resource access, and emergency services in regions that were once effectively cut off. Logistics become schedulable rather than speculative, and communities at the desert's margins gain a stable connection to the wider economy. What was once a barrier becomes a corridor. The Taklamakan Desert Highway stands as a mega-project achievement because it proves that persistence, not permanence, is the key to infrastructure in hostile landscapes. The road does not freeze the desert in place. It holds a narrow line through motion. Its success depends on accepting that the environment will never stop pushing back and designing systems ready to respond every day. By turning shifting sand into a managed condition rather than an unsolvable obstacle, the highway demonstrates that even the most unstable ground can support dependable infrastructure if planning, maintenance, and respect for natural forces are built into the design from the start. How do you carry a high-speed roadway through mountains, where cliffs, fog, landslides, and deep valleys leave almost no margin for error? The Yaxi Expressway answers that challenge by turning extreme topography into a controlled transport system, one that prioritizes predictability over brute confrontation with the landscape. Running through southwestern Sichuan, the Yaxi Expressway connects Ya'an and Xichang across one of China's most complex mountain regions. The terrain is steep, geologically active, and frequently shrouded in cloud and rain. Traditional road alignments that descend into valleys and climb back out would have introduced sharp gradients, dangerous curves, and constant exposure to landslides. Instead, the expressway maintains elevation through an intricate sequence of bridges and tunnels, allowing traffic to pass above the most unstable ground. This approach reshapes the driving experience. Rather than reacting continuously to the terrain, vehicles move along a controlled alignment with gentler slopes and smoother curves. Travel times become predictable, and the psychological strain of mountain driving is reduced. What looks effortless to drivers is the result of enormous planning precision hidden in the structure beneath the wheels. Engineering discipline is especially visible in the expressway's bridge network. Tall piers anchor spans across deep valleys, concentrating structural effort into fewer, more robust crossings, rather than scattering it across unstable slopes. Tunnels bore directly through ridges, avoiding surface hazards such as rockfall and debris flows. Each decision reduces exposure to the natural processes that constantly reshape mountain terrain. Weather is an equally persistent adversary. The region experiences heavy rainfall, fog, and sudden visibility changes. The Yaxi Expressway incorporates monitoring systems, drainage infrastructure, and safety controls designed to respond quickly to these conditions. Reliability here is not static. It depends on constant surveillance and operational readiness. The expressway also plays a stabilizing role beyond transportation. By providing a dependable corridor, it supports logistics, tourism, and emergency response in areas that were previously difficult to reach. Goods and services move more efficiently, and communities gain access that does not disappear with the seasons or weather shifts. Crucially, the Yaxi Expressway accepts that maintenance is part of the design. Slopes must be reinforced, tunnels inspected, and bridges monitored continuously. In mountain infrastructure, durability is measured not by how little attention a system needs, but by how well it performs under constant care. The Yaxi Expressway stands as a megaproject achievement because it converts some of China's most demanding geography into everyday infrastructure. It does not flatten the mountains or deny their risks. Instead, it navigates them with precision, discipline, and restraint, proving that in extreme landscapes, the most effective engineering is not about forcing the land to comply, but about shaping movement so safely and predictably that the terrain's drama fades into the background. How do engineers carry a roadway across a canyon so deep it seems to erase the ground below, without turning the crossing into a slow, winding descent, followed by an equally punishing climb? The Doge Bridge answers that challenge by concentrating effort into one decisive span, turning extreme vertical distance into a single, continuous moment of connection. Spanning the Beipan River Canyon between Guizhou and Yunnan provinces, the Doge Bridge is one of the highest bridges in the world, with the deck hanging more than 560 meters above the river below. Before its construction, travel across this region involved long detours along mountain roads that descended into the valley and climbed back out again. Distance was not just measured in kilometers, but in time, fuel, and risk. The bridge's cable-stayed design allows the roadway to float high above the canyon, while distributing enormous loads through tall towers and tensioned cables. Rather than relying on massive piers rising from the valley floor, an impractical and dangerous approach in such terrain, the structure anchors itself to the canyon's edges. Height becomes an asset rather than an obstacle. From a driver's perspective, the crossing feels almost unreal. Vehicles move smoothly across open air, largely unaware of the depth beneath them, unless they choose to look. This calm experience is the result of careful engineering aimed at controlling vibration, wind response, and structural flexibility. At this scale, stiffness alone is not enough. The bridge must absorb movement without amplifying it. Construction itself demanded unusual strategies. Building upward from the canyon floor was impractical, so segments were assembled outward from both sides, meeting precisely in the middle. Surveying accuracy and coordination were critical, because even small errors would compound dramatically over such a long and exposed span. Precision replaced brute force. Operationally, the Doge Bridge transforms regional mobility. By keeping the roadway high and direct, it eliminates steep grades, sharp curves, and weather-prone valley routes. Travel becomes faster, safer, and more predictable, supporting freight transport, tourism, and daily movement in areas that were once relatively isolated. The bridge also represents a shift in how infrastructure addresses difficult geography. Instead of repeatedly negotiating the terrain descending, climbing, and adapting at every turn, the Doge Bridge bypasses complexity by rising above it. This approach reduces wear on vehicles, lowers fuel consumption, and simplifies long-distance travel across mountainous regions. The Doge Bridge stands as a mega-project achievement because it integrates one of the world's deepest natural barriers into everyday transportation. It transforms dramatic vertical separation into routine connectivity, proving that with disciplined design and precise execution, even the most intimidating landscapes can be crossed in a single, confident line, turning isolation into continuity and distance into something drivers barely notice at all. How do communities survive on sheer mountainsides when building a road is impossible, and every journey begins with a vertical climb rather than a step forward? In Atulea village, perched high on a cliff in China's Sichuan region, the answer was not a tunnel, a bridge, or a highway, but a ladder system anchored directly into rock, turning a life-threatening ascent into a repeatable, dependable route. For generations, residents of Atulea relied on a precarious path of vines, wooden poles, and hand-cut footholds to reach the outside world. Every trip to school, markets, medical care, or administrative services required climbing a near-vertical cliff hundreds of meters high. The route was slow, exhausting, and dangerous, especially for children and the elderly. Geography dictated isolation, and risk was built into daily life. The introduction of steel ladders fundamentally changed that equation. Fixed directly into the cliff face, the ladders create a continuous vertical pathway where none could exist horizontally. Rather than reshaping the terrain, the solution works with it, respecting the limits of the mountain while inserting a precise, engineered line of access. Each rung is anchored to resist weather, load, and repeated use, turning the cliff into infrastructure rather than an obstacle. What appears modest next to megabridges or dams is, at human scale, transformative. The ladders replace uncertainty with predictability. Climbs that once depended on weather, strength, and luck become controlled movements with known steps and stable handholds. Safety improves not because the climb disappears, but because it becomes standardized and maintainable. The social impact is as significant as the physical one. Regular access allows children to attend school without daily danger, enables families to reach healthcare in time, and makes trade and communication routine rather than rare. Mobility shifts from an ordeal to an expectation. Over time, this reliability reshapes opportunity, allowing Atulea to participate more fully in regional life. Engineering discipline remains essential. Steel in exposed mountain environments must be inspected, maintained, and occasionally replaced. Corrosion, rock movement, and weathering are ongoing concerns. The ladders succeed not because they are permanent, but because they are cared for as working infrastructure rather than symbolic gestures. The Atulea ladders stand as a megaproject in principle rather than in size. They demonstrate that infrastructure does not need scale to deliver impact, only precision and relevance. Where geography once enforced isolation, a targeted engineering intervention restored connection, dignity, and safety. Atulea shows that the most meaningful megaprojects are not always the tallest or longest. Sometimes, they are the ones that quietly replace fear with confidence, turning an impossible daily journey into a climb people can trust step by step every day. How do planners build a city-scale retail and public complex without letting the building dominate the skyline or consume the precious ground-level space a dense city needs to breathe? Chengdu SKP Park answers that challenge by hiding most of its mass underground, allowing the park itself to become the landmark, while commerce operates quietly below. From the surface, the project reads as an urban landscape rather than a shopping center. Lawns, terraces, trees, and water features spread across the site, inviting people to enter without the visual cues of a conventional mall. This is deliberate. The design treats greenery, circulation, and public space as the primary experience, while the commercial program is concealed beneath the ground. That concealment is an engineering commitment, not a cosmetic trick. Beneath the park lies a multi-level retail and hospitality complex, extending several stories below grade. Structural systems must support heavy soil loads, vegetation, water features, and constant foot traffic above, while maintaining clear spans and flexible layouts for shops below. Drainage, waterproofing, and ventilation become mission-critical because failure would affect both the park and the commercial space simultaneously. Movement is carefully choreographed. Water features and paths on the surface do more than decorate. They guide visitors towards subtle openings in the landscape. Descending into the complex feels less like entering a building and more like slipping into a canyon carved into the ground. This gradual transition softens the psychological boundary between public park and private commerce. The decision to place retail underground also stabilizes the skyline. Instead of adding height to an already dense city, the project preserves visual openness and daylight at street level. The park absorbs noise, moderates temperature, and provides a civic gathering space that functions independently of shopping hours. In effect, the ground surface works for everyone, whether they intend to buy anything or not. Operationally, the challenge is balance. Lighting systems must replace lost daylight without creating an artificial atmosphere. Air circulation must remain comfortable despite deep enclosure. Maintenance access has to be continuous because water, plants, and public use create constant wear. The success of the project depends on treating the entire system, park and retail, together as one integrated piece of infrastructure. Completed in 2022, Chengdu SKP Park demonstrates a different approach to megaprojects. Instead of announcing itself through height or spectacle, it disappears into the city fabric. The engineering effort is concentrated not in a visible icon, but in making invisibility work reliably. Chengdu SKP Park stands as a mega-project achievement of concealment. It proves that at city scale, the most generous move is sometimes to give space back, to let greenery, openness, and public life take precedence, while commerce supports itself quietly underneath. In doing so, It redefines what urban density can look like when engineering serves restraint rather than dominance. How do you design a large-scale research campus for a global technology company without turning it into a sealed-off fortress, cut off from the city, inward-looking and rigid? The OPPO Research and Development Center answers that challenge by treating innovation not as something that happens behind walls, but as a process supported by openness, circulation, and spatial continuity. The building itself becomes part of the research system. Located in southern China, the OPPO R&D Center was conceived to host laboratories, offices, testing facilities, and collaborative spaces for thousands of researchers. At this scale, the problem is not simply fitting functions together, but keeping them connected. Innovation depends on exchange between teams, disciplines, and ideas, and architecture can either accelerate that flow or quietly block it. Instead of a single monolithic block, the campus is organized as an interconnected environment. Workspaces are arranged to encourage movement and visibility, allowing people to encounter one another naturally rather than through scheduled meetings alone. Circulation routes are generous and legible, reducing friction in daily movement and making collaboration feel routine instead of forced. This openness is an engineering decision as much as an architectural one. Large floor plates require careful structural planning to maintain flexibility over time as research needs evolve. Mechanical, electrical, and data systems are distributed so that spaces can be reconfigured without major disruption. In a fast-moving technology sector, adaptability is not a luxury, it is infrastructure. Environmental performance is also built into the logic of the campus. Daylight access, internal courtyards, and controlled shading help reduce reliance on artificial lighting while maintaining comfort. Climate control systems are designed to support sensitive research environments without isolating the building entirely from its surroundings. The goal is balance, precision where needed, permeability where possible. Operational reliability underpins everything. Research facilities cannot afford frequent interruptions, whether from power instability, system failures, or inefficient layouts. Redundancy, monitoring, and maintenance access are treated as integral components of the design. What appears calm and seamless from the outside depends on disciplined operation behind the scenes. Equally important is the campus's relationship to the city. Rather than presenting a closed corporate edge, the project integrates with its urban context through accessible, ground-level spaces and visual openness. This signals a shift in how large technology firms position themselves not as isolated enclaves, but as participants in the civic environment. The OPPO Research and Development Center stands as a contemporary megaproject achievement in workplace infrastructure. It shows that scale does not require rigidity, and security does not require isolation. By aligning architecture with the rhythms of research and collaboration, the project turns a massive technical facility into a flexible, human-centered system. In doing so, it demonstrates a broader lesson. In the age of rapid innovation, the most effective infrastructure is not the one that locks functions in place, but the one that quietly supports change day after day without getting in the way of the work it was built to serve. What ties all of these megaprojects together is not their size, their cost, or the way they dominate photographs. It is the quiet fact that they work. Day after day, they absorb pressure of water, wind, traffic, climate, energy demand, and human movement, and convert uncertainty into something scheduled, measured, and dependable. What once felt impossible stops being news and becomes routine. Across deserts, oceans, mountains, and dense cities, the same logic repeats. Engineers do not eliminate natural forces, they learn how to negotiate with them. Sand is stabilized rather than defeated. Rivers are guided instead of stopped. Wind is broken, water is lifted, land is manufactured, and vertical space is treated as usable ground. The planet is not rewritten by fantasy, but by discipline. As these systems fade into the background of everyday life, they quietly change how the world operates. Distance shrinks, risk becomes manageable, resources arrive when expected, cities grow upward or inward instead of outward. What we experience as convenience is, in reality, the result of constant monitoring, maintenance, and design choices that assume failure is possible and plan around it. This is what it means for a planet to be operated. Not controlled in total, but carefully managed through networks of infrastructure that never stop responding to pressure. The true wonder is not that these projects exist, but that they endure. And as climate shifts, populations grow, and old assumptions break down, the lesson becomes clear. The future will not be shaped by bold ideas alone, but by systems that can adapt, repeat, and keep working long after the headlines fade. The impossible does not disappear, it becomes infrastructure,